Welcome to my primary maths and SATs help videos. This video is all about finding fractions of amounts. So let's start with looking at how we find half of something, and that would be useful if we were holding, say, a half price sale in a shop. So imagine we've got an item that costs £50. We want to find what half of 50 is. Now this is a calculation that most of us could probably do in our heads, but it's the method that I want to show you that's important. So what we would do is we would take the £50 and we would divide it by the denominator 2. Now if you need help with the terminology around fractions, please do have a look at my video on an introduction to fractions. So the calculation is 50 divided by 2, which is 25. So half of 50 is 25. Now here we've got a shirt with a value of £75. We want to find out what half of that would be. So again, we take the 75, we divide it by the denominator 2, and the answer is £37.50. And of course, if we can't do that in our head, we could simply do a written calculation. And that's explained in my video on division. Now let's look at some other simple fractions of amounts. So imagine we've got a roll of cloth that measures 27 metres and somebody says, well, I'd like to have a third of that, please. So thinking about the method that we've just used, the way we would calculate this is to take the 27, divide it by 3, and there's our answer. So 9 metres is 1/3 of 27 metres. Here we've got a bag of 8 sweets. We want to find a quarter. So again, we would take the 8, divide by 4, and that gives us 2 sweets. So a quarter of 8 is 2. And here we've got a bag of sugar that has 42 grams in it. Imagine we need 1/7 of that for a recipe. To work that out, we take the 42 grams, divide it by the denominator 7, and that gives us 6 grams. Now let's look at some slightly more complicated fractions of amounts. So if we start with our 27 metre roll of material again, we've already found out what 1/3 of it is, but imagine we were asked to find 2/3 of it. This is what we would do. We would do exactly as we did before, take the 27 metres, divide it by the denominator, which gives us 9. But now we've got a fraction that has a 2 as the numerator, and we can't ignore this. So what we do is we do another step, and that is to take the answer from step 1, which is 9, and multiply it by the numerator, which gives us 18 metres. Now you might be wondering why this method is different to the previous one we've used. Actually, it's not. It's just that I didn't show the second step with the previous ones that we did. I'm going to though now. So if we go back to our 1/3 of 27 metres, we took the 27, we divided it by the denominator, and that gave us an answer of 9. The second step is to take the 9 and multiply it by the 1, the numerator, but you can see that the answer is exactly the same as it was after the first step. And that's what happens when the numerator is a 1. We basically don't need to do the second step because the answer will be exactly the same. Let's have a look at one more example. So here we have our 8 sweets again. Well, we already found out what 1/4 of 8 is. Imagine we were asked to find out what 3/4 of 8 is. So step 1, we take the 8, we divide it by the denominator of 4, which gives us an answer of 2. Then we take the answer of 2 and multiply it by the numerator, which is 3, and that gives us an answer of 6. And just once more to show you that even though I didn't show this, we actually did the same when we found a quarter. We took the 8, divided it by the denominator, gave us an answer of 2, and then we multiplied the 2 by 1, which actually gave us the same answer. So here are some examples that you might want to have a go at yourself. If you do, you'll need to pause the video so that the answers don't come up too quickly. So number 1, we've got 3/7 of 42 grams. Number 2, find 5/8 of 24 litres. And number 3, find 4/5 of 15 kilometres. So step one would be to take the 42 grams, divide it by 7, gives you 6. Step 2, you take the 6 and then you multiply it by the numerator of 3, and that gives you a final answer of 18 grams. Remembering, of course, that we need our units of measure in there, in this case grams. Number 2, step 1 is to take the 24 litres and divide it by the denominator of 8, gives you 3. Step 2, you multiply that 3 by the numerator 5, and that gives you a final answer of 15 litres. And number 3, step 1 is to take the 15 kilometres, divide it by the denominator 5, gives you 3. Step 2, you take that 3, multiply it by the numerator of 4, and that gives you a final answer of 12 kilometres. So, the method to find a fraction of amount. Step 1, you divide the amount by the denominator, in other words, the bottom number in the fraction. Step 2, you then multiply the answer to this by the numerator, in other words, the top number of the fraction. And finally, as I've just said, don't forget any units of measurement in your answer. Before I move on to some slightly more complicated calculations, I want to try and demonstrate what we've done so far in a more visual way. So if we take this example, find 2/3 of 12 centimetres. We picture our 12 centimetres like this. Step 1 is to divide that by the denominator of 3. And the answer we get is 4, so that would be 4 centimetres here. So by dividing by 3, we've shared the 12 into 3 equal sections and found what one of them is worth. In other words, we've found what 1/3 of 12 is. Step 2 then is to take that third, which in this case is worth 4 centimetres, and multiply it by the numerator of 2. And the answer is 8 centimetres, because if 1/3 is 4 centimetres, 2/3 is going to be 8 centimetres. It's 2 lots of the 4. Now let's take a look at this question. Here we've been asked to find 1/5 of 1 kilogram, and we know that step 1 is to take the 1 kilogram and divide it by the denominator of 5. Well, that's quite difficult, and it's also going to give us a decimal answer, which we want to try and avoid. So when you get questions like this that involve measure and where it's going to be difficult to do the division, think about converting the measure first. So in this case, we can do that. And so finding 1/5 of 1 kilogram is actually exactly the same as finding 1/5 of 1,000 grams. And then we can continue just as we did before. So step 1, we take the 1,000 grams, divide it by the 5 denominator, gives us 200 grams. And then I'm going to show you the second step, although we don't really need it. But then we would take as step 2 the 200 grams and multiply it by the numerator, which is 1. So our final answer is 200 grams. So let's see if we can use the same method for these two. So number 1, we've got 4/5 of 1 kilogram. So again, I'm faced with having to divide the 1 by the 5. I want to avoid that. So I'm going to change that question into 4/5 of 1,000 grams. Now I divide the 1,000 by the 5, gives me 200, and then I need to remember for step 2 to multiply that 200 by the numerator, which is 4, which gives me an answer of 800 grams. Number 2, this time we've been asked to find 3/5 of 2 kilograms. So again, I'm faced with a little bit of a problem here because I've got a 2 divided by 5, which I want to avoid. So I'm going to convert it again. So finding 3/5 of 2 kilograms is the same as finding 3/5 of 2,000 grams. And then I take step 1, which is 2,000 divided by 5, which is 400. Step 2, I take the 400 and multiply it by the numerator of 3, which gives me a final answer of 1,200 grams. So here are some more practice questions for you to have a go at if you'd like to. These are with more complicated calculations. So can you find the following fractions of these amounts? First of all, 5/6 of 3 litres, then 3/8 of 2 kilometres, and finally 7/10 of 4 metres. And again, you'll probably want to pause the video here so that the answers don't come up too quickly. So looking at question 1, the first thing we need to do is to convert the 3 litres into 3,000 millilitres. Then step 1 is you divide the 3,000 by the denominator, which gives you 500. And then step 2, multiply the 500 by the numerator. So your final answer should have been 2,500 millilitres. Number 2, the first step is to convert the measure from 2 kilometres to 2,000 metres. First step then is to divide that by the denominator, which gives you 250 metres. Step 2 is you multiply that by the numerator, so your final answer should have been 750 metres. And the last one, you're going to need to convert the 4 metres into 400 centimetres. Then divide that by the denominator and multiply the answer by the numerator. So your final answer to that one should have been 280 centimetres. I hope you found this video useful. Please have a look at my other primary maths and SATS help videos if you'd like to as well. And thank you for watching.